Hello BookTube. I'm here today with a book review. The book I'm going to be discussing is A Thousand White Women, The Journals of May Dodd by Jim Fergus. Now, this book sounds a bit weird, and it is a bit weird, and it is because it is based on a premise of 1,000 women being gifted to the Cheyenne people in 1878 um, to help them assimilate into white culture. Now, it's a alternate historical fiction, so it's not based off of real events. However, in, what was it? Yeah, not 1878, 1875. In 1875, the chief of the Cheyenne, Little Wolf, he did ask President Grant for a gift of 1,000 white women in exchange for 1,000 horses because they were a matrilineal society. And the idea was that in that way their people could be assimilated into white culture, and the children of these unions would basically become white people, and that way the Cheyenne would become part of the white culture. So they asked for 1,000 white women to marry. Now, President Grant immediately turned down this proposal, and everyone was horrified. But the author was intrigued by this idea and thought, what if this had actually happened and this had gone through? So this is the journal of the woman who married the chief, Little Wolf, and it's just, it's weird. And it's not that good. Now, I knew going in that it probably wasn't going to be that good because a lot of the reviews on Goodreads are negative, but however, it just was it sounded so weird that I had to read it. So I saw a copy of it at a thrift store about a year ago, and I bought it for like $1. And yeah, so now let me just start by saying this book is over 400 pages long, and it is definitely like too lengthy. It could easily have been 200 pages and have been just as effective. It takes over 100 pages for her to even be introduced to her Indian husband, Little Wolf, and so we're left just hearing about her past and about all these irrelevant details, and it's just, we don't need it. It's useless. Cut it out. I didn't need it. I didn't need to hear about it. Now, a lot of my problems with this book stem with the fact that Jim Fergus simply doesn't appear to understand women. He doesn't appear to understand how their bodies work or their psyches, and I'm not saying that a male author can't write a female protagonist convincingly, because they can, even from a first-person perspective. And we've seen male authors like George R.R. Martin do first-person female perspectives really well and absolutely nail it. But this is not one of those cases. So May Dodd, the protagonist, she grew up in a very wealthy home in Chicago, and she fell in love with her father's foreman, and she had 2 children out of wedlock with him, and she's always described herself as an unconventional woman. And even when the foreman, whose name was Harry, proposed to her and offered to marry her, she turned him down because she didn't want to be married to him, which seems a bit ridiculous for a 19th century woman, but okay. And her family placed her in an insane asylum for promiscuity because they were so embarrassed by her actions. Now, when she's in the insane asylum, after she's been there for several years, she is offered a way of escape, and she decides to take it by volunteering for the Brides for Indians program. Now, the Brides for Indians program takes willing white women and places them with the Cheyenne, basically. So she agrees to join the program and then travels out west. Now, also there's a lot of unnecessary rape in this book. For example, while she was in the insane asylum, she was frequently being raped by one of the nurses. One of the male nurses, or I'm not sure if he was a nurse, he was some sort of orderly or something, and at the same time, we're supposed to believe that she's just a fertile myrtle, and that she can have a baby after having sex one time, and she will automatically know that she's pregnant, but at the same time, we're supposed to believe that each time that she's been raped throughout this book, she did not conceive because the male character pulled out, which does not seem believable to me, like, at all, because that's not how women's bodies work, but, you know, whatever. I guess this is fiction. I guess we don't have to know about it. like, so aside from the biology being wrong, it's also just frustrating because she did not need to have been raped by an orderly, and it contributes nothing to the story. And so it's just violence for the sake of violence' sake. Now, she is raped at a later point in the book, and that was kind of necessary, but at the same time, it was frustrating because she doesn't really experience any, like, afterwards trauma. Just a little bit, but it's not, but, you know, not enough to make the story actually feel, like, too belabored down with that fact. So that's frustrating, too, because if you're going to put rape in a book, you have to put the aftermath. Like, you just have to. Otherwise, it's not believable. You can't just have the event and then no one reacts to it and everyone's okie dokie fine. Like, it's just so frustrating. So, yeah, he gets a lot of things wrong, Jim Fergus does. And so, like, he thinks that later, okay, one of my biggest frustrations with this book is that May Dodd is, like, pretty annoying. She, like throughout the book, she does things that women aren't supposed to do. And you know me, I'm a pretty big feminist, but, like, a 19th century woman wouldn't have dreamed of going into an Indian man's sweat lodge dressed only in a towel and been like, well, we're here, you have to let us in because, as we say so. Like, she does that. She and her friend dress themselves in a towel and demand entrance into the Indian man's sweat lodge. She speaks up in tribal councils. She does, tribal councils, it sounds like she's on Survivor. Let's see, what else does she do? She, is impetuous, and she, identifies herself as an agnostic, despite the fact that, again, this is the 19th century, and again, she turns down the first man's offer to marry her, even though she's having his children, and it's like, you are desperately in love with him, and you are having his babies, so why would you not want to marry him? Because you are literally in the 1870s. This is so strange. So it would have made far more sense if he had refused to marry her, but she was still in love with him anyways, and he was kind of not that great of a guy. But anyway, it's not important. Like, I guess I've moved on. The point is this book has a lot of issues. Also, a lot of other reviewers have commented on it sort of being racist because the one black woman who's also part of the Brides for Indian program, she is of course faster than any other. She is faster than any other member of the tribe, and she wins all the foot races, and she becomes a warrior, and so her having all this, like, superior athletic skill is like kind of racist. Plus, also, she's, like, sings, like, slave songs all the time, and she is just, yeah. Also, another really annoying fact is that there's a Swiss woman who, or a Swiss immigrant, who is also part of the Brides for Indian program, and she is multiply described as being like a cow. Now, either having been described as having bovine characteristics, or being placid like a cow, and it's like 8 times throughout this entire book that she's described as being like a cow, and one time she's described as being like a pig. And that's not even including all the other descriptions of her appearance, where she's described as looking like a potato. Now, that's all we know about her, is that she's ugly. We get it, Jim Fergus. She's ugly, and that she joined the Brides for Indian program because no one else would marry her. Like, we get it. Like, oh my gosh, it's so annoying. Also, May Dodd is quite frustrating because she's a bit of a Mary Sue. She's stunningly beautiful. Not that she's ever commented on her own appearance, because, again, this is her journals, but we know that because, of course, the chief wants to marry her, and because there's an army captain who is absolutely enamored with her. He's the army captain. His name is John Burke, and everyone is in love with him because he's so handsome and astute and well-read, and he's an absolute gentleman, but he only has eyes for May. Now, and that's just kind of annoying. Yeah, so we know she's beautiful. She also is, like, the only woman who gets like a good name when she joins the Indian tribe. They all have names like woman who falls down a lot, and woman with face like a potato. But she gets the name Misok, meaning swallow. And it's because when she went swimming, she insisted on going swimming with the men in the morning. Yes, because she was because the men every morning they meet at the creek to bathe, and she was like, "Why do only the men get to bathe? I want to bathe in the creek, and I don't want to do drudgery chores." So she goes, and then she dives into the creek, and then they name her Swallow. Yeah. Yeah, multiple times, twice in this book, she gets pregnant after having sex for the first time, which is, again, annoying because that's not how, like, ovulation works. But I could believe it once, because once it does happen. But twice, and especially once, was necessary for the plot, but not twice. And again, same thing with the rape. Like, twice was not necessary. Once was kind of maybe necessary, but not twice. And so, let's see, what else was I going to say? There was something else. Yeah, there's lots of stereotypes in this book because, again, you have the, like, athletic black woman, and you have the ugly Swiss woman who's very fertile, and you have, and you also have the racist Southern belle, and it's just so frustrating because it's like, aren't any of these people anything other than caricatures? Also, something that I found very annoying is that we don't spend a lot of time focusing on her relationship with her new husband, Little Wolf, who is the chief of the Cheyenne. Now, that would be interesting, right? Because, like, that, we'd like to know about her relationship with him, because the whole point of the book is that she marries an Indian man, and, you know, what is their life like together? So she's his third wife, and, but yet, she, like, there's so little time devoted to their relationship and devoted to, like, there's so little time that they even spend together in this book, and it's like, okay, well, if the whole point of the book was for you to fall in love with an army captain, then you should have written a different book. Like, so I guess this book is just kind of confused with what it wants to be. In the end, she doesn't, spoiler alert, she doesn't even have the Little Wolf's child, she has the army captain's child, and so it's like, well, again, what's even the point if the whole point was if the whole point was for you to fall in love with an army captain and bear his children, then, like, you could have just written an entirely different book. In the end, I picked it up because the premise sounded really interesting, but I think he utterly screwed it up. Like, I did give it 2 out of 5 stars because I felt like some of the writing was quite good. Not all of it, definitely not all of it. Most of it was bad, but there were some periods where it was very, like, beautifully described and things like that, the nature, scenes like that. But overall, I was quite frustrated. I rolled my eyes a lot while I was reading this, which is really annoying because I think the premise is really interesting. If you wrote a book about 1,000 white women who were taken out of prisons and who were taken out of asylums because there weren't enough white women volunteers, and you had them become brides of the Cheyenne, and they tried to assimilate, and they bore their children and everything like that. Like, it would be really interesting to try to see, like, the culture clash, and to see also too to see them trying to assimilate their children into white culture, and the rejection they would face of being half-breeds, and I think that would be interesting. But instead, he just wrote this, like, half romance with this army captain, half, like, meandering about the prairie lands. Like, I don't even know what this is. So I'm probably being kind of generous by giving it 2 stars, but it really wasn't a 1-star read because I read it within a couple of days and it was quite easy reading. So, like, and I didn't absolutely hate it. So I feel like 1 stars are for books that I absolutely hate, like The Maze Runner. Oh man, did I hate The Maze Runner. So let me give you an example of how good the writing can get. Although I wrapped myself in a blanket, I felt the sting of wind on my cheeks as I exited the teepee. We were camped in the crook of a small creek surrounded only by high, treeless plains, uninterested in lonely country, with nothing to break the wind, which comes whipping down off the ridges to assault our little group of teepees huddling here together, so small and defenseless. How tiny we are, exposed to the huge elements. No wonder these people are superstitious in the face of it. No wonder they try to curry favor with the gods of the 4 directions, with the gods of the earth and heaven, with the spirits of wild animals and weather at whose mercy we live. And no wonder, by the same token, that the white man builds his forts and houses, his stores and churches, his flimsy fortifications against the vastness and the emptiness of earth which he does not worship, but tries instead to simply fill up. And that was on page 335 of my edition. So, yeah, ultimately that's the end of my review. Oh, by the way, when she was in the asylum, because she was there for promiscuity, they literally treated her with, they treated her by injecting hot boiling water into her vagina, and she was raped, and yet she has no problems having sex later on in the novel. Like, so that's totally not realistic. That's not how women or people work. So, like, yeah, okay. You messed up, Jim Fergus. You done messed up. Anyways, I hope you're having a lovely day. Bye, BookTube.